The orchard always woke up before I did. By the time I stepped onto the porch with my mug of coffee, the apple trees were already shimmering with dew, their branches bending beneath the weight of ripening fruit. Bees hummed lazily between blossoms, and the smell of damp earth carried that faint sweetness of summer mornings. This was my kingdom, 30 acres of trees planted by my father, nurtured by my hands, and meant to stand for generations. I never imagined anything could disturb it, until the roar of diesel engines cut through the morning stillness. At first I thought it was farm equipment from a neighbor. But then came the grinding, metallic groan of heavy machinery, and my stomach sank. I set my mug down, barely half drunk, and jogged down the porch steps, heart pounding with every step. As I rounded the corner of the barn, the sight hit me like a hammer. 2 bulldozers, massive yellow beasts, idled at the edge of my orchard. Dust plumed up around their treads as they crept closer to the first row of trees. And there she was. I knew she'd come eventually. She had a way of appearing whenever there was something to criticize, complain about, or outright control. The self-anointed queen of the HOA, wrapped in a pastel cardigan that probably cost more than one of my tractors, striding toward me with a clipboard clutched under her arm like it was the law of the land. "Good morning," she called out, as if she hadn't brought an invading army with her. She raised her sunglasses just enough to give me a patronizing once-over. "Lovely day for progress, don't you think?" I stopped short in the dirt path, staring at her like she'd grown a second hit. "Progress," I echoed. "Karen, what the hell are those bulldozers doing on my land? Plastic and sharp all at once." "Oh, don't be dramatic. They're here to help." She gestured grandly at my orchard, rows upon rows of trees standing tall in the morning sun. All this space, all these apples. Cute even. But think bigger. Imagine this land transformed into Applewood Resort and Spa. A destination for weddings, investors, weekend getaways. Do you know what that will do for our property values? This is my property. This is my farm. You can't just bulldoze it because you want a hot tub and a valet stand in your backyard. Karen-tesque. Flipping a page on her clipboard as though I were a misbehaving child. Factually, I can. I already filed the paperwork with the county. Fast-track the whole process. By the time you bother to complain, the resort will be halfway built. But the words had tremor in her voice. She wasn't telling me the truth. She wasn't telling me the truth. She was bluffing. The problem was, she didn't know that I was the one she needed to bluff to. Still, I forced my expression into something between confusion and disbelief. "You filed paperwork for my land, without my signature, without my consent. Details, details." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "What matters is the vision. This little farm might have meant something to your family once, but it's outdated. We live in a community now and the community needs growth. Luxury. Refinement." The first bulldozer lurched forward, its treads grinding across the dirt. The operator avoided my eyes, staring hard at the levers in his hands, as though shame were something you could bury in steel and diesel smoke. With a deafening crack, the blade met the trunk of the first apple tree. The roots tore up from the soil like bones snapping. Apples spilled into the dirt, rolling across the ground like marbles. "Stop," I shouted, sprinting forward, but Karen stepped neatly in front of me, her heels sinking into the soft earth. She tilted her sunglasses down her nose, smirk curling her lips. "You're wasting your breath," she said smoothly. "You can fight me, or you can get out of the way. But either way, this orchard is finished." For a second, I couldn't move. My chest heaved as I watched the dozer shove the tree aside, its branches splintering like kindling. I'd pruned that tree every spring. I'd harvested bushels from it every autumn. My father had planted it 40 years ago. And now it was lying in the dirt like it never mattered. Karen must have seen the pain widened. "Don't look so heartbroken. Think of it this way, some people grow dreams." She paused, savoring the line. "But others build empires." For behind her, the second bulldozer rather row. The orchard shook with every movement. Dust rose, mixing with the smell of crushed leaves and broken fruit. My hands clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag her out of the way and park myself in front of those machines until they stopped. But instead, I did nothing. I let the grin spread across my face slowly, carefully, the kind of grin Karen had never seen before. Because unlike her, I didn't need to throw tantrums or bluff my way into power. Unlike her, I didn't need to fake authority with a clipboard and an expensive pair of sunglasses. I knew exactly who signed off on those permits. And it sure as hell wasn't her, so I stood there in the dirt, watching my orchard fall piece by piece, the devastation sinking into my chest like stones in water. Karen thought she'd won. She thought this was the end of my farm. But all I could think was how sweet it would be when she realized she'd just bulldozed her own empire before it had even begun. The council chambers smelled faintly of dust and old paper, the kind of smell that clung to municipal buildings where decisions were made slowly and grudges were carried for decades. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder, some curious, some whispering about the spectacle they knew was coming. Word had spread fast. When Karen set her sights on something, she announced it like a royal decree, and the whole town came to watch whether she would get her way, or for once, fall flat on her face. At the front of the chamber, under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, Karen stood at the projector like a politician on the campaign trail. She wore a scarlet blazer that screamed importance, her hair curled into tight waves that framed her smug smile. On the screen behind her glowed architectural renderings of glossy cottages, a glimmering pool, and a spa with glass walls overlooking what had once been my orchard. She tapped the remote like it was her magic wand, switching slides with a flourish. "Imagine," she said, voice dripping with drama, "a luxury getaway right here in our own community. No more backwater farms dragging down property values. No more unsightly orchards clutter in the view. We'll have Applewood Resort and Spa, a crown jewel that will put us on the map." Polite applause trickled in from the handful of HOA loyalists in the front row. The rest of the crowd shifted uneasily, whispering. They knew the orchard. They'd bought cider from it, walked its rows at harvest festivals, picked apples there with their children. But Karen was nothing if not persuasive when she wanted to be. She clicked to the next slide, showing a mock-up of sleek villas where my oldest trees used to stand. "Thrive," she continued, "with increased tourism, job creation, and higher tax revenue. And as for the outdated farm," she allowed herself a pause, savoring the words. "Well, some things must be sacrificed in the name of progress," the projector hummed. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. And that was when I rose from my seat. The scrape of my chair on the floor echoed across the chamber, drawing every eye to me. Karen turned, blinking in surprise, her confident smile twinkling for the first time all evening. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "This is my presentation." I adjusted my jacket as I walked down the aisle, calm and steady, letting the weight of the moment hang. "You're right," I said evenly, "it's your presentation. But this," I gestured to the council table where I now stood, "terp, is my chamber." Confusion rippled through the room. Karen tilted her head, laughing nervously. "Your chamber. Oh, please. Don't make a scene." I stepped behind the microphone, the wood cooled my hand. "Allow me to introduce myself properly, since Karen seems to have forgotten. My name is Samuel Hart. I am the elected chair of the County Zoning and Permits Board. Which means, Karen," I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a deliberate drawl. "I am the one who approves your resort." Gasps broke out across the benches. Karen froze in place, her mouth opening and closing like a fish stranded on the shore. For the first time since I'd known her, she had no words ready. "That's impossible," she finally stammered. "I filed everything. The paperwork is in order. The county has already fast-tracked my application." I pulled a thick folder from my bag and let it thud onto the table. "You mean this paperwork?" I opened it slowly, flipping through the pages with theatrical care. Falsified signatures, incomplete environmental assessments, and, my personal favorite, a land use application signed not by the property owner but by you. I held up the page so the entire room could see her name scrawled across the line where mine should have been. A ripple of outrage surged through the chamber. Neighbors began to mutter, some outright shouting. "That's fraud," someone called. "She can't just take his farm," another shouted. Karen's face flushed crimson. "No. This is all a misunderstanding. I was acting in the community's best interest." She turned desperately toward the council members. "You all know me. You know I've given years of service to the HOA. I'm not some criminal." I raised a hand, and the room quieted. "No one is questioning your service. But this board does not approve developments built on lies. And we do not condone bulldozers plowing through private property under the cover of fraudulent documents." I stamped the denial notice onto the table, the red ink bleeding through the page like a wound. "Your permit application is hereby denied." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. The sound seemed to break something inside Karen. She lunged toward me, heels clattering against the tile. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the chamber walls. "I worked for months on this. This resort would have changed everything. You don't get to decide." But the guards were already moving. They intercepted her halfway to the table, one on each arm, as she kicked and flailed. Half in applauded, half in lauder, their voices drowning out her protests as she was dragged toward the doors. I watched her go, calm and still, the weight of the gavel still reverberating in my palm. When the doors slammed shut behind her, silence settled again. I looked out at the crowd, at the neighbors who had come expecting a coronation for Karen and had instead witnessed her downfall. "The orchard will be restored," I said firmly, "at her expense. Every tree she bulldozed will be replanted, every inch of damage repaired. and she will face charges for her actions. Applause thundered through the chamber, shaking the rafters. I felt it in my chest, not as pride but as relief. Relief that my father's orchard would live on. Relief that the roots we'd planted ran deeper than greed could reach. As the crowd began to disperse, I gathered my papers, tucking them back into the folder. I imagined the orchard as it would be in the years to come. New saplings growing, their branches stretching toward the sun, apples shining red and gold in the light, stronger than before. Karen had said some people grow dreams, others build empires, but the truth was simpler. Empires crumble, roots endure, and mine ran too deep for anyone like her to tear out.